Hello, Cubs fans, and welcome to a brand new edition of Cubs on Tap. I am Luce. He is Juice, the Juice and Luce show, back on the air for the first time in a little while, buddy. It's good to be
Hot
back with
minute.
you. Hot minute indeed. Happy Thursday, my friend. Baseball things aside for a moment, how are you?
Good. Been playing a lot of golf.
We love
so
that.
That's good.
Tis the season.
Yeah, you know my schedule once.
I
Baseball. It's like golf in the morning and then baseball at night. Found myself today watching a little Cubs baseball, which in some ways hasn't been the most fun. But I did leave today's baseball game with probably more positivity than anybody in the chat. We were talking a lot about it. I saved my thoughts for today, and I'm going to unveil those in just a few minutes.
Heck yeah. I'm excited to hear about the positivity. I need it for more reasons beyond baseball. But outside of that, man, hey, we're doing okay. We're getting through. It's almost the weekend. Today is my Friday, so I am acting as such. I will actually be out at the ballpark tomorrow. So and we'll talk a little bit about that game in this upcoming series at the end of the show. On what? Yeah.
Isn't it tank night?
Yeah, tank day in the bleachers. It's the first one of the summer. I'm excited.
That's a Ron Lucas Cubs on Tap special. He is Mr. Tank Man.
It is. It is my goal this season to get all 5 of them, or all 6 of them, however many there are. There's only 1 or 2 of them that I don't particularly love, but there are 2 or 3 of them that I'm like, I need that one. There's
the first one's fire. It's a really good tank.
They're really good. I'm actually, as we're sitting here now, you got me thinking about tank tops. So I'm going to pull up their promotional schedule here in just a second as we get into this thing. But Juice, unfortunately here today, buddy, we are talking about a series loss to the Brew Crew. Correct me if I'm wrong, Juice, but my feeling about this series is this series could have been a series win for the Cubs, and it felt like it should have been in a lot of ways. You mentioned it kind of today as we talked as a group throughout the game of just the Brewers felt like they got so many lucky bounces today. And ultimately, I think that's ultimately what was the difference, because you could have made the case that the last 2 days, even though they ended up in losses, the Cubs offense has finally woke up a little bit and started to do some good things.
Yeah, I think overall, and this kind of fuels my positivity, because
I like that.
In games where Bellinger, Morel, and Seiya all go yard, I would like to see what the Cubs' overall record would be in those. I bet you it's really high. I would imagine too that there's a lot of good trending going on. I mean, Dansby gets his hit in the 9th and at least allows them to get the tying run to the plate. Yeah, this series sucked because you never want to lose 3 or 4 to the division leader and fall even further back in the standings. But I think we also failed to realize how early this is. And 2, when you're looking at projections, the Brewers are playing well above their offensive ability. And they said that kind of on the broadcast today. Boog talked a lot about how fortunate they've been. And they're going to get some players back. And I loved the comparison he made to you think it's only going to get this offense better, but there's a good chance it goes the other way and it comes back to more of a normal mean for them. I think that the Cubs, in a lot of ways, haven't played their best baseball yet. I think that if there's a reason to be concerned, it would be the fact of there is no trade market and there is no ability to go out there and make this team better. I'm sitting here today, and the rumor mill, I think, is hotter earlier than in the season than I can remember it. I mean, we're talking about huge names from the Blue Jays, and let's face it, the Blue Jays have been bad, but they're that team that can go on a 10-game run, win 10 in a row because they have the talent, and find themselves right back into a situation where they're contending.
Yeah.
But it seems like the writing on the wall for them is the same as the Mets. And the Mets have some pieces that I think the Cubs would definitely look at. I would be really concerned if we were sitting here and we were losing games heavily because of starting pitching. but we're not. Like we're losing games because we're not hitting, and those bats hit. Like you look at Morel, he's been extremely unlucky. You look at Seiya Suzuki, he's working back from an injury. Bellinger isn't going to hit 250 all year. He's just not, and he's going to hit for more power. You look at Dansby Swanson, like he's not going to hit 300, but he's going to slug better. He's going to hit over the, and even Nico Horner. Like Nico Horner's been okay. He has been great. But there's some guys on this team that I think are going to play better over the course of 162. I think that if you're looking at the Cubs objectively, you need to look and say, yeah, this has been a brutal month, and it's the same as it's been. We were just going over the schedule, going into this. Lose tomorrow, it's 10-18. It's the same record they had last year. But to add to that too, as my little joke that I alluded to in our pre-show, it's Mental Health Awareness Month in May. So they haven't been very good for my mental health.
Ironic to say the least.
But I would be extremely worried if the Cubs didn't have such a great farm system and all of these big names not being out via trade. And if you read between the lines of what Jed Hoyer and kind of Carter have been leaking out there over the course of this last week, is how frustrated they are with the lack of offense and how frustrated they are with the lack of ball games being won. And I think if you put all of that together, I think it just means that maybe the Cubs need to be a little bit more aggressive now opposed to later and bringing in guys that would help this offense sooner rather than later. And I think that if you're a team within the major leagues right now, the Cubs are completely maybe one of the only teams that have the ability to do that. There's just so much prospect depth that if they wanted to go out and make a splash now, they could do it. And that's why I sit here more optimistic than the next, because if you read between what's happened the whole kind of run of this, Ricketts comes out in the offseason and says this is the most upset he's been over the course of a season ending last year. You look at Jed and Carter, and they've been very aggressive and talked ad nauseum about how this is not the standard, but they need to be better. They need to put them, and they're entering a window. And that's why I always think that at the end of the day, they're going to make a move prior to this trade deadline, and they're going to add some reinforcements. And once they do that, and once they get some of these big names hitting, it's going to be a nice run for this Cubs. And it's kind of going to help the fact that June is a nice soft schedule to land on opposed to this May. It seems like they can go on a little bit of run. The Reds aren't playing very good baseball. You're going to get the White Sox over the course of June. And there's some other teams that are on there. St. Louis is one of those two that, you lost two to them, but I mean, they kind of ducked you over the course of those two games that should have been played. And I mean, you're going to get your shot at the Brewers again. So over the course of this June, it's a lot of chance to make up a lot of distance that maybe you've added on yourself. But I don't think the Brewers are running away with this division. And I think if you're looking at a team that has the capital to go make a splash, they're maybe the only one within the division that could do it.
Yeah, that's 100% true. And you look at it too, Juice, just kind of going back and filling in some of your points there with additional information. The Blue Jays, everybody's writing off already, but the Blue Jays are only 3 games under 500. The Cubs are 1 game under 500 for reference, right? Like they're more close versus like a team like the Mets, like you said, right? Who's already 10 games below 500. They're sitting at 22 and 33 already on the season. They're almost as bad as the Miami Marlins, who is a team that, many people have been chiming, hey, Cubs, why don't you go talk to the Marlins and see what you guys can get from them? Which once upon a time was, hey, why don't we go get another starting pitcher? To now it's, hey, maybe you're adding a bullpen over at best. And, unfortunately, they don't have a ton of bats to really offer now that Luis Arias is in San Diego. So probably a large reason to why some of that stuff has died largely with the discussions there. A couple of comments, though, from some of those that joined us here early. Hank says this series was a kick to the junk. Scott asked, how in the holy fuck did the shitbirds pass the Cubs in the standings? A hot stretch will do that. They are 8-2 in their last 10. So certainly that is a large reason for that. Hank says not a happy camper, but he comes here because of the positivity. Juice is Mr. Positive today. I'm a little more on the sour loose side today than Juice is, unfortunately. And Darren says here it's time for a catcher upgrade. He says he thought Jan had one more year in him, and I know there's a lot of frustration there with Miguel Amaya. And I think that's something we could talk about, especially in relation to today's game, Juice, of just what this ultimately turned into, right? So many pass balls, so many balls getting away from the catchers, so many just easy runs scoring because of plays that guys like Miguel Amaya should be making if he's your everyday backstop. I mean, unfortunately for the Cubs, there is no answer internally right now. All the guys that they have in the catching depth position are at least a year plus away. What do you propose, Juice? What's going to happen for the Cubs going forward? Is it just a Miguel Amaya needs to get his shit together and they move on, or do you look to some of that veteran, catching depth that they loaded up on in the offseason, guys like Jorge Alfaro, to potentially come up and maybe get a couple games here, at this point this season?
Is Jorge still in the system? I didn't get a chance to go and look at that.
He might not be. I was thinking about that earlier too.
I think he was given his walk, but either way, I think for the meantime, if you're talking about, and Tyler brought up a great point in our chat when we were talking about, Amaya just being kind of lackadaisical on some of the easy ones. That kind of sent me down a little bit of a rabbit hole in terms of looking at catcher stats and just kind of some of the blocking and throwing guys out. But believe it or not, Amaya's 15th in terms of blocks above average, which isn't bad. That's top half of the MLB. But in terms of throwing out runners, you have the 23rd in Gomes and the 60th out of 62 qualified catchers in terms of caught stealing above average, which, that's just not going to cut it. Gomes doesn't catch enough either to really move that number up or down. Amaya has kind of been getting the brunt of the starts. And two, like we talked about, just the lackadaisical effort. The MLB and the stats, they kind of evaluate these as easy blocks, medium blocks, and then definitely hard ones, which the hard ones, the top guys have like a 6% chance of blocking. Most of the time, those hard pitches are like wild pitches. And then the middle ones are kind of half and half. And then those easy ones are always going to be called as pass balls. And the top of the league is 97% in terms of the easy ones. Miguel Amaya finds himself at the 93.9%. So, you're letting go of almost 5% more past you on easy ones. And that's what definitely, against a team like the Brewers who's going to run, it shows like a single turns into a triple really quick. And a walk turns into a guy on third. We saw it all series. The Cubs are going to have to figure something out. You can look to a team like the Rockies with Diaz and see if, that's a trade candidate, a guy who maybe you can go out and get. He's a free agent going into next year. You could look at a Danny Jensen from the Toronto Blue Jays, another name that's out there that potentially, maybe we're, cruising towards. But, you're going to have to spend some definite prospect capital to get that to happen. Now, mind you, it won't be as expensive as you think, considering the fact that both of those guys are going to hit free agency. So really you're paying for 3/4 of a season. But I think that if you look at what's going on behind the plate, you can have them not hitting, but throwing out guys and blocking the plate. That's fine. The catcher position is but you can't have both sides bad. And we were looking in depth too. The starters have been so great. And so the anomaly of it is the catchers combined for a -3 in framing. So it's not like the catchers are buying these great pitchers any strikes either. So I'm sure that the front office is looking at that, but it definitely seems like it's going to have to be an outside solution because Pablo Aliendo is not coming up here. Ballesteros can't play the position just yet. I don't know if he ever will either. That's the other kind of argument within the Cubs, front office. I know they want to try to let him do that, but it's more of a Schwarber situation where They just kind of love him for his bat. So, but other than that,
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about a bunch of journeymen after who, mind you, aren't on the 40-man either. So you're talking about sacrificing some problems. And we talked about this on the live, that the Cubs are kind of playing 6 men short on their 40-man because they have to keep guys like Alcantara and a few other names that we had dove deep on who have really no chance of being here. So you're playing with pretty much 34 guys for 26 spots. The math isn't very great there either.
Yeah, the math definitely doesn't math. And just to add on to that, right? You look at this 40-man right now. I mean, you talk about the number of injuries too to key pieces that coming into the season, a lot of people were expecting to do good things. Edward Alzolay is still on the IL. Yency Almonte is still on the IL. Colton Brewer, who, did some okay things for the Cubs on the IL. Caleb Killian is on the IL. I feel like that's a huge loss from just a health standpoint. Obviously, Merriweather, Palencia and Wicks, who seem to be close to being back. They both threw in Iowa on, was it Tuesday night? I believe it was Tuesday night. Excuse me. I'm coming off a cold. I'm still all stuffed up. But,
you're good, bro.
And even Keegan Thompson being hurt. But yeah, you bring it up perfectly. You look at this minor leagues right now, and Kevin Alcantara is on the 40-man. Matt Mervis is still on the 40-man right now. There's going to be some hard decisions that need to start being made, and I think it will come with some of these prospects soon, because you have Owen Casey hitting 290 in AAA right now. You have guys that are producing. You have a Brendan Davis who's had a really good run with the Iowa Cubs right now. When does he get a look? Some of these guys are eventually going to force their way onto the roster. And I like what you brought up too with, you mentioned a little bit earlier about Jed and, them hinting at their frustrations and things like that and whatnot. They're definitely frustrated. You heard it in Jed's voice. He's like, hey, if we got to start calling some guys up that are going to take away at bats from, some of these guys that have proven track records, we're going to do it. That's just what it is. And you saw it today, right? I mean, PCA comes up and PCA effectively took Seiya Suzuki's spot in the starting lineup. Seiya comes in and hits a pinch hit home run because maybe he's starting to feel a little bit of that hot seat that, oh shit, I got to start producing or I'm not going to be playing here, much the rest of the season because guys like PCA are going to come up and take my spot. So it's going to be something that we'll certainly have to keep an eye on. A couple more comments here, Juice, before I want to ask you about a couple more things that occurred in this Brewers series. Coming from our friend, Mr. Tyler, of course, he says, what's up, boys? Sorry he's late to the party. Miguel Amaya's effort was unacceptable today. Can't have it below the standard. We talked about it earlier. This team is in a rut. Bats were cold. But when you can't control it, is their effort. And Amaya gave up a run today because of poor effort. Craig should have benched him as soon as he took out Little. Yeah, I know Tyler was furious about that. That is something that we're going to have to keep an eye on. I wouldn't be surprised if Yan Gomes catches on Friday after that effort. Maybe to send a message to Miguel Amaya saying, hey, you got to get your shit together here, man. Otherwise, it's not going to get done. Darren follows up and says, so true, guys, when the team is on the fringes of a playoff quartet talent, catching is critical. Look at when they won the World Series. You had 3 very capable catchers on the roster in Ross Contreras and ultimately in Miguel Montero. It's nice having good catching depth. And right now, the Cubs are certainly struggling when it comes to catching depth. But, Juice, I do want to ask you here about not even so much the bats, because I know the bats were cold, but we saw it after that explosion in that second game on Tuesday where they ultimately put up 6 and then back-to-back days of 6 runs and then 4 runs. So offense put out better output in the second half of this series, which is something good to see. Talk to me about the Shota Imanaga start, because we talked a little bit about it on the watch along last night, which I know you were unable to join, but I asked the same question to Nick and I asked it to Tyler, so I'm going to ask it to you. Do you think the extra extended rest messed with Shota's tempo and routine going into that start, or do you just think he was due for a clump?
I think it's both. I think both is right. I mean, I really think that, pitchers are a creature of habit. They want to get the ball every 5th day, but I also think too, like, he was kind of trending that way, in my opinion, and missing a lot of his spots. And I don't know, sometimes I always wonder too, like, is there such thing as a bad team matchup for a guy? And I don't want to say that like the Brewers are going to be that because they haven't seen him very much, but they do have a lot of good lefty power hitters, and they have a lot of guys that when the ball is up have quick bat speed to get to it. If not, Yelich, Adames, Bauer's kind of that way too. But I don't know. I don't think we can knock the kid for going out there and throwing one like he did. Obviously, he's been incredible, but I don't know. I think in both ways, you would have loved to see him pitch in that St. Louis series, and I really do think they dodged Shota Imanaga in that St. Louis series, however they could, and Craig kind of took the bait. But 11 days for a pitcher too is kind of tough to navigate through. It's been a while since he's been on the mound. I'd expect him to bounce back in the next one and throw a good game. But yeah, when there was a lot of worry about this guy once it flipped to June, and when the ball starts to fly out a little bit more, you're going to work at the top of the zone like he does. It's going to be maybe a problem. I mean, I don't foresee him giving up 7 like he did the other night, but I do think that we're going to see the ball leave the ballpark a little bit more against him, just strictly on where he operates within the strike zone. There's going to be times where he throws that 93-mile-an-hour fastball, and a guy's just looking for it. And if it's at the top of the zone and you put a good swing on it, in the months of June and July and August, it's going to go. It's a small ballpark, and when the wind's blowing out, it's tough to keep the ball in. So I do think that there's a little bit to say about giving him that extra rest, but I also do think too that he was due for a clunker. It was definitely coming sooner rather than later.
And I wonder if with Shota, the biggest thing that I think about here is it's something that I feel like flew severely under the radar, and it's something that I'm gonna do a little bit more of a deep dive into in hopefully the coming days. He mentioned, I feel like this wasn't talked about nearly as much as it maybe should have been, but he appeared on the Pat McAfee show, right? There was a couple of shares of clips and things like that. Him talking about throwing up in the zone on McAfee and the ha-has, but like it didn't capture a lot of attention in Chicago, in my opinion. But there was a very critical piece of that interview that he brought up that I think is severely overlooked because Juice, we talked about it, right? Like teams are eventually going to get used to seeing that fastball splitter mix, knowing to try to lay off the splitter and hit the high fastball. But Shota Imanaga throws like 8 pitches. He even said it. He's like, I've got stuff in the arsenal I haven't even thrown yet. He's like, I'm just waiting to throw it. And he said that on Pat McAfee's show. He said, I've got other things in the arsenal that I haven't even thrown yet. I'm kind of wondering if this 7 earned run start, and almost it feels like it came at the perfect time for the deep dive I want to do of, hey, teams are maybe starting to adjust to you a little bit because they've seen enough of you and they have the scouting report. How do you adjust back? And I want to see if all of a sudden we're sitting there watching a show to start and he throws something, you go, oh shit, I haven't seen that yet this year. What was that? Right? Because he had an arsenal of 6 to 7 pitches that he threw over Japan that, sure, he's still largely a fastball splitter guy, but if he needs to get you off balance, he has other offerings that he can do that with. He has a slider that he could throw more like a cutter or more like a true slider. He does have a curveball that he mixes in here and there. He has other offerings. And I'm wondering if that's going to ultimately force him to start throwing some more of his arsenal, just given the state of, what things are trending that way. Darren says here, never dreamed 2 months ago that Morel's third base play would be so far down on the worry list. Hey,
yeah, he's been good.
He has been good, and a big home run today from him. He gets you back in the Digger Point column here today.
It's been like all May.
You were on just as much of a skid as the Cubs were here in the month of May.
Yeah.
It was a rough one. It was a rough one.
That happens.
It does happen. It does happen. Everybody gets hot. Everybody gets cold. Or you could be just like me and you're just always cold. But Juice, I do want to bring this up because I think this is an important topic that came about through this Brewers series. It's not necessarily directly related to this Brewers series, but it's important. and that is the injury to Cade Horton. Cade Horton left his start in Iowa the other day. They originally called it back. Now it's considered lat injury. He is in Chicago being examined by the Cubs. There is no update further, Scott, to answer your question here, but this is something people are going to keep an eye on because he's a guy that I've been pining to see in the bullpen at some point this season. I don't think we're going to see him as a starter this year, but now this injury, especially if it's something with his lat and affects his throwing motion, this could set him back now even further where maybe we don't see Cade Horton at all at the major league level this year, even though he's been very clearly nasty at just about every level he pitches.
Yeah, I almost think too, like maybe it's a good idea to limit him. I mean, too, that the problem with the Cubs right now is not starting pitching. And I love what they're doing with Ben Brown, but Ben Brown's been better as a starter than he has as a reliever. And it starts to make me wonder, like, yeah, sure, it's great to have all these combo guys like your Wisniewski's and, you know, what they did with Javier Assad. But I almost like hope that the next guy, like a Cade Horton, who's so highly touted as one of the best starting pitchers prospects in baseball, just gets his shot to be a starter. And this is just not, there's just not much room for him there this year. I mean, in all things considered, you look, you know, Steele's been pitching well as of lately. Obviously, Shota and Tyone has a decent outing after we were going back in the chat about how he was on pace to only get through like maybe 4 2/3 today. But then buckles down, finds a way. Assad has obviously been, you know, incredible. And then you get that wonderful start out of Ben Brown the other night where he throws, you know, 7 no-hit innings. There's just really not a spot for him. And then you're going to get guys back like Drew Smiley. You know, you're looking at, or if he's not already back. Is he already back? Did I miss the Drew Smiley? Yeah, see,
Drew Smiley is already back, yeah.
And you still have Hayden Wisniewski.
He just came back, though. He came back during that Cardinal series.
You still have Hayden Wisniewski. If you needed to stretch him out, he's fully capable of doing that. And then you got some weird Kyle Hendricks experiment that you're running too. So, yeah, there's a lot of depth at that. And I almost look at Cade Horton like break glass if needed. And I still feel like the Cubs are going to win enough to get themselves into a buying market come, you know, the trade deadline to add more valuable 1-inning, 2-inning relievers that, you know, maybe they can go and piece it together like that. I do like Cade Horton. I think he's going to be a great pitcher, but I definitely want to like limit where he's at and make sure he's healthy, make sure that, you know, this is done all the right way, because when he's incredible, it's going to be something. We've talked about this off record. Like, he's got the stuff to be one of those guys that you just pay for 10 years and he's at the top of your rotation for 10 years. So that's, make sure you do everything right. And then too, like Darren adds in the comments, I didn't even mention Jordan Wicks is going to need a spot to pitch real soon too. So they have a lot of guys that I think can piece them to the end of this. Let's just hope that Cade Horton is healthy. If he misses some minimal time, that'd be great. And then just continue his development at the AAA level.
Yeah, I think that is the best move for him now this year, especially with the threat of the injury coming into play as well. It's going to be interesting to see what the Cubs do, because I would almost make the argument, Juice, based on what we've seen from him so far this year, maybe Jordan Wicks becomes an effective reliever for this year, because you have so much good
lefty out there that can throw strikes. And I love Whittle. I think he's gross, but he just doesn't throw strikes at a clip that makes you confident.
Yeah, he's just inconsistent hitting the zone sometimes. When he's on, and when he's off, you get a little nervous. Exactly. No, and that's a perfect way to put it. But like, I think there's a world where Jordan Wicks could come back and throw out of the bullpen. I really do. Like, I think there's a world where that happens, because, you know, he was given the rotation spot because of what he did at the end of last season, and obviously continue that in the spring training. Nobody expected this from Ben Brown, right? Not this early, at least. You know, nobody expected this from Shota Imanaga. Nobody expected this from Javier Assad. These guys have stepped up in big ways where, you know, they're probably going to they should at least get to retain their starting spots. Maybe you do bring back a Jordan Wicks, especially with dealing with the forearm injury. You say, hey, buddy, we don't need you to go out there and throw 100 pitches every fifth day. Come out of the bullpen and throw 20 pitches, you know, 2 to 3 times a week. And that'll be just as helpful to help this team win for this year. And then you can sit back and look at next year and reevaluate your starting rotation, because, I mean, realistically, you still don't have a lot of space for everybody. You know, maybe you are trading from starting pitching depth going into next season to go get a big piece somewhere else. And so that's something that we'll certainly have to keep an eye on. Juice, I want to open it up to you because this is just a series that, at the end of the day, I feel like the Cubs were, on the other side of some bad luck. They got great starting pitching, as you mentioned. Steele had a great start on Monday, Brown on Tuesday. Imanaga was the only rough start. Tyone was great on Thursday. They were just on the wrong side of a Brewers team that's playing really good baseball at the right time. They got, and it wasn't even William Contreras and Christian Yelich beating them this whole series. It was a little bit of Willie Adames, but it was mostly guys like Joey Ortiz and Bryce Perkins and these lesser known players that are just hitting hot streaks right now at the right time. Any final thoughts here on this Brewers series before we truly close the storybook on the month of May again, where they could finish with the exact same record as they did a year ago and look ahead to June?
Yeah, thank God it's June almost. Any more bad Cubs baseball, and we should throw ourselves off of a cliff. It hasn't been that fun. My final thoughts on it is in the moment, there's just a lot of bad that you read out there on this team. A lot of finger pointing in terms of Twitter. It's taken a lot of me to stay off of the X or Bluebird app, however you like to still call it. But I will say this. If there is a front office that needs to be aggressive and has the ability to be aggressive, it's this one. I think that they've kind of talked a big game over the course of this offseason about how, if this team is in a position to contend, alert guys, no one's going to run away with this division. They're looking for somebody to, take the reins and be a favorite. I think the Cubs could be that team. I really do. I think, too, that the market sets up so well for them. There's going to be some catcher prospects out there, or not prospects, catcher reinforcements that are going to be out there. Definitely to be traded for if you wanted to go that route. There's always a nice reliever out there that you can throw your name in the hat. But there's a lot of good one-off guys here that are on teams that are not trending in the right direction that you could bolster your lineup with. It's not a Pete Alonso. I know a Bregman's a possibility as well. If the Astros do look like they want to sell off. I know it'd be crazy, but the Rockies have a few names too, other than Diaz. Maybe a McMahon is floated out there in a trade. You can find a place for him to play within your lineup. There's some names that could be had, and I think the Cubs have the capital. That's the thing. If the Cubs if this were 2 years ago, I would be pushing the panic button. Because at that point, all solutions had to come from in-house. This is the one team that has the capital to make sure that some of the resources come from other teams, from out of their own system. And they can make it happen. Jed, and this is my PSA to Jed and Carter, earn that contract, earn those dollars for yourself, because you see there's a problem here, and it's going to continue to go this bad. Or maybe not this bad. It will get better, but it's definitely not going to put you in the position of contending for a high playoff spot or for the division if they continue to roll this same nine out here like this.
Yeah, well put. It was a frustrating series. It was, like you said, baseball is the sport, right? And I talked about this with Joey on Monday's show. Baseball is a sport where we as fans naturally want to get upset at every single game, but you really do have to zoom back out and consider that baseball is the only sport where you can have an entirely different storyline by the end of the year with an entirely different looking roster, because guys come up and guys go down and guys come out of the woodwork and guys disappear. And it's a big trending thing. So as we sit here right now at the end of May, yeah, we're frustrated. I think a lot of that stems just from the team's performance through most of May, right? The first half of May, we did the math on it. They were about 500, maybe a game above 500 through the first half of the month. But then in the second half of the month, that's when the losses really started to pile up. And now staring the exact same record from a year ago for the month of May in the face, assuming they lose tomorrow against the Reds. But if they win, hey, good job. You were one game better than you were a year ago.
And you're back to 500.
Yeah.
And you're back to 500. And you know what, Ron? You said it perfectly. And I always to sum it up, this is the quote I always think of. Throughout a baseball team or baseball season, you're never as good as it's when it's good, and you're never as bad as when it's bad. So it's bad right now, but they're not as bad as they're playing. And then they're going to play a set where they win like 8 in a row or 9 in a row, or they win 15 out of 20. And you're like, man, they're going to win the World Series. No, they're not as good as when they're playing their best baseball.
They're playing
it's
good.
Somewhere in the middle. It is always somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, absolutely. Water finds its level, and there's no sport more than baseball where that definitely applies. One quick comment here from Darren. He said, great way to word it, Ron. Council should let you tell Wicks why he's heading to the bullpen. Hey, I don't know if that's going to happen. We're going to have to wait and see. Wicks still hasn't been activated. There isn't really any indication that he's due back soon. I think they really are taking their time. And a large part of that is because their starting pitching has been so good that they don't need to rush him back into something that he's not able to do. I do want to give one quick shout out here. And it's something that if you're in the Chicagoland area and you listen to our show and you're around the ballpark this weekend, really, really cool thing occurring this weekend. It is Ranters Fest. And if you don't know what the hell Ranters Fest is being hosted by a lot of you guys all know who Danny Rocket is. He makes the great parodies of songs on Cubs Twitter, and he's one of the many co-hosts of the San Ranto podcast. Well, they are doing their 1,000th episode this weekend as a part of just a huge celebration to fundraise money for the Lost Boys. It's a great cause. It's a great weekend. The lineup is crazy of the events going on around the ballpark. Starts with a pregame at Issei Lounge tomorrow and ends with a full-blown comedy show featuring a friend of ours here at Cubs on Tap, Mr. Joe Kilgallen, as well as the Bleacher Bum Band performing. Saturday's a huge party with notable names that you probably follow within the Cubs Twitterverse. People like Sarah Sanchez, some of the people from CHGO, a number of people from all over the world of Cubs fandom. It's going to be an awesome weekend. And if you're able to get out even for just one of the days, go over to sonranto.com. So that's SONRANTO.com /Ranterfest. That is RANTER Fest. Go get a pass. The GA passes, they're all relatively affordable, and they go to great causes. They have some silent auction items and raffle items as well. And even if you just want to go out ahead and donate and show your support, you can do that as well. So I want to give a big shout out to Danny Rocket and the cause for this weekend. I will be around the ballpark tomorrow, so if you're able to come out tomorrow, say hello to myself and the lovely lady. She will be with me tomorrow at the ballpark as well. And we're going to partake in some of the festivities since we unfortunately cannot get there for the rest of the weekend. So highly encourage anybody that's listening, or even if you are listening to this on podcast on Friday, if you can get out for one of the 2 days, Saturday or Sunday, definitely do so. Sunday is also Lou Gehrig Day at the ballpark, so it'll be a big ALS day as well at Wrigley Field. So it's going to be a really cool weekend coming up here. And Juice, that's where we got to go talk to right now is about this Reds series coming up. Cubs finish out the month of May on Friday against the Reds. Your pitching matchup is Graham Ashcraft against Javier Assad. That'll be a 1:20 start. This one is on Marquee Sports Network. And then the rest of the weekend, Saturday's game is a night game. It is a national broadcast yet again. They will be back on Fox. That'll be Hunter Green versus Justin Steele. Should be a great matchup between what's widely considered the two aces for these ball clubs. And then on Sunday, June 2nd, pardon me, it's back to a 1:20 start on Marquee Sports Network. It will be Nick Lodolo against your no-hitter, Mr. Ben Brown, back in the starting rotation on Sunday. So, Juice, what the hell do the Cubs need to do to get June off on the right foot in this series against the last-place Cincinnati Reds?
Yeah, the Cincinnati Reds don't do much well. Looking through their team rankings as of late, I mean, you're looking at a team that has a .216 team batting average. That'd be 29th in baseball. You're looking at a team that just doesn't really hit for a lot of power either. They're at the bottom of the league, not the bottom of the league, but bottom half of the league in terms of home runs per game. They really don't pitch very well either. They don't slug. I mean, you're looking at a team that is just ripe for the taking. They're not playing very good baseball. So lean on what you do well is what I would say going into the series. Pitch well, and if you pitch well, you're not going to have to score too much because they don't score much either. So maybe get out there, get the bats going a little bit, treat it like when Alabama plays their opening schedule game of the year. You know, and I'm not going to say that the Reds for a while have been a thorn in the side of the Cubs, but they're not playing very well as of late. It's time to just take advantage. You know, go out there and, like I said, treat them like your warm-up squad game and take these games and get some momentum going into the month. Start it with tomorrow. It's one game at a time, but do what you do well. If they pitch well, I got a pretty good feeling that they'll win a lot of these games coming up against the Reds, because the Reds just don't do they just don't hit. They really don't, and neither do we over the course of the last couple. But if we pitch well enough and pair that with the fact that the Reds really don't hit, maybe only 5 and 6 runs winning games in this series, opposed to it seems like they needed to score 10 to 12 against some of these teams that they had played over the course of May.
Yeah, absolutely spot on there, Juice. Yeah, it's going to be a solid weekend weather-wise as well at Wrigley Field. So probably going to be a good day to get the ball in the air, let the wind help you out a little bit. The way it's trending right now, Friday's game, it's going to be about 75 degrees and a little overcast. The wind is projected to blow towards the third base line, so it'll scrape across out to left field. So still get a couple balls up and out into the jet stream. Saturday will be the opposite. Not a ton of wind, but a beautiful day, 67 and sunshine is what's expected for first pitch. Sunday, there was a chance of rain, but the wind is expected to blow out. So that'll be a key in this series that the Cubs and Reds both need to keep an eye on. And as well, just like you said, right? Do what you do well. Go ahead.
Real quick, just to add, I know I shit on the Reds a lot there for a second, but the one thing they do well is when they get on base, they run. You're looking at a team that's second in terms of stolen bases per game, and a team that only gets caught 80% of the time, next to none in terms of caught stealing. So Make sure if they are getting on base, we're checking runners as opposed to what happened over the course of this weekend, because it did seem a lot that the Brewers got a guy on and they were going. So I would imagine the Reds would have the same approach in this game.
Indeed, you got Ellie De La Cruz, who is the base stealing phenomenon this year in Major League Baseball. You don't want to get that guy on base too much and let him take free bags. Because like you said, we saw it in this Brewers series. It was a thorn in the Cubs' side, and you certainly don't want that to come back and haunt them again. But Juice, I want to expand just quickly on your thought, right? Do what you do well and try to get some wins here to start off June on the right foot, because you do have a schedule that is largely favorable to what the Cubs are. You're not playing any juggernaut teams. You're playing a lot of these either middle-of-the-pack teams or lower teams for the most part. The Brewers are probably the best team they will see, and that's not until the end of the month in that final series on that final weekend of June. Otherwise, you see the Reds twice. You will see the White Sox for 2 games, 3 games with the 4th-place Tampa Bay Rays, a couple more with St. Louis, this time at Wrigley Field, so that certainly makes a big difference when it's all said and done. You got 3 with the Giants at Wrigley as well. You got a couple off days baked in this month too. Hopefully that's good after the Cubs played a lot of baseball for a lot of days straight. You got the Mets for 3. You got at the Giants for 4. So there are some games. Giants second place in the NL West, but that second to 4th is kind of a big mosh pit of people. It's the Dodgers and everybody else at this point. Just go out there, do what you do best. The bats seem to be catching fire. You know, if this Brewer series is any indication of that, they were able to get a sizable amount of runs in games 2, 3, and 4. Carry that momentum into this next series. Have these guys continue to pitch well. Assad had, by all things considered, a pretty strong outing against the Cardinals, despite giving up 4 earned. You had Justin Steele, who pitched a gem against the Brewers on Monday, and then obviously we all know what Ben Brown did on Tuesday. He'll go against these Reds. So just keep doing what they do. And I think there is some optimism with the Reds being on the schedule. It's also going to be good, I think, for the Cubs to get back to Wrigley Field, because we've seen it already all this year. They play naturally better at Wrigley than they do away from the ballpark. So hopefully we'll see some more of that. Juice, before we get out of here, buddy, any final wrap-up thoughts to this week, this series, and what's to come in June?
Laz Diaz has taken the throne of the worst umpire in baseball. Congrats to Laz.
Now that Angel is gone, a new crown to the
Angel and Joe West. We've been so blessed over the course of the last couple of years.
We really have. And there's been a lot of good young umpires coming into the league. So maybe that's a good thing for umpires. And maybe, automated strike zones won't need to totally be a thing of the future. It'll be a great resource, but they might not have to be the reliance for all of eternity. Juice, before we get out of here, as always, want to remind everybody, Cubs on Tap. 1 or 2 shows here at the On Tap Sports Network that covers your Chicago Cubs. We've had a couple of live shows this week. Be sure to follow our friends over at the Dingers Podcast. You can see when they go live as well, right here on the On Tap Sportsnet YouTube. Like, subscribe, hit the bell button. You'll get that notification when they go live. You'll get the notification when we go live. You get the notification when all of our other great shows go live as well. You can follow them at Dinger Cubs. You can follow us at Cubbies on Tap on the socials. He's Juice on Tap. I'm Luce on Tap. Crack them, lock them, and fuck them. At Joey Knows Nothing, Teddy Freddy 270, Nick _ on tap, Silent Bob _2. You guys know the drill. Bulls, Bears, Blackhawks. We've got it all. Bears are the Hard Knocks team this year on HBO. That's big news in the world of Chicago Bears. Blackhawks guys are getting dialed up and ready for the NHL draft at the end of June. And the Bulls guys will be doing the same. Big off seasons for both of those winter sport teams that play at the United Center.
Yeah, new writer on the Bulls side too. Give a little shout out to Andy Hensel. Just joined the team. More Bulls content coming out. Congrats, Andy, on joining On Tap Sportsnet. Enjoyed your first article about the Pacers and them being kind of a blueprint for the Bulls. If you have a minute to go read it, highly recommend it. I retweeted it. It is on my page. And you can also find Andy and all his work at On Tap Sportsnet.
Well said, Juice. www.ontapsportsnet.com and On Tap Sportsnet on the socials. The On Tap Sports Network. Go and check out what's on tap in Chicago sports. Juice, it's always a pleasure, buddy. Unfortunately, the Cubs losers of this series, but we roll into the weekend with a home series at Wrigley Field, a pair of 120 starts, and a night game at Wrigley, a rare Saturday night game this coming weekend against the Reds. Hey, buddy, what do you say? We get out of here the only way we know how at Cubs on Tap?
Fuck the Cardinals and the Reds and the Brewers and the Pirates.
And let's go Cubbies, baby.